If you dislike the defense attorney after the first day, you are going to despise him after the second. The first witness is a firefighter slash paramedic, and he dispatched to the scene. There was a large hole in the building, people asking for help. He entered through the hole and saw chaos. He decided who went by ambulance or life flight. The son, who survived, was life flighted. He believes 7 total patients were taken out. There was a second life flight brought in, but they didn't take anyone out. Instead, they assisted at the scene because the second child it was for died at the scene. He goes through how people were transported to get treated and where some of the injured were located. He talks of a victim that appeared to be thrown after being hit by the car and thrown over the bar. He said that when he saw Zane, he had a pulse, a light one. Alana was not removed because she was already dead. He does not wear a body camera. There was no cross. Next up was the deputy. He responded to the scene. It was pure chaos. People were running around, people on the ground. Walking up, he saw a hole. He saw a small child who didn't appear to be breathing. The witness chokes up a little bit. The child was in the grass just outside the hole. He described some of the injured that he saw. He assisted with first aid as he could. He was told the driver is in the back of a squad car. He was told to investigate her, and specifically about possible intoxication, as that was indicated. He describes the field sobriety test, specifically mentioning the eyes jiggling a bit when you're drunk and trying to follow a pen or a finger. He asked the defendant questions while looking for signs of intoxication. He said he could smell alcohol, bloodshot and watery eyes, and problems with balance. He was told she had neuropathy in her hands and feet. The state asked what is his understanding of the neuropathy and how that affected how he treated the defendant. This was objected to by the defense, but it was denied. He said neuropathy meant things like the one-legged stand was off the table, couldn't do that. He wouldn't ask someone with balance issues to try to do the walk and turn, and he said he had to help her move. He did the gaze test actually multiple times. She was unable to focus on his finger. He couldn't do the test because she wouldn't focus on the finger. She would just stare straight ahead at him instead of the finger. And at one point, she did try to use her head a little bit to follow it, but she couldn't keep up. He did a mental test, and she was able to say the alphabet without singing. Then he did a number counting test from backwards, 100 to 88. She failed. She went backwards to 91, then forwards to 100, and then skipped over 88 and started counting in the 70s. He believed there was probable cause for arrest due to driving with impairment. She was handcuffed, taken under arrest. Another deputy continued the investigation into the OWI with the defendant. The deputy took the defendant to a hospital for a blood draw for the OWI. By the time they reached the hospital, the deputy was aware of fatalities. So that at this point, they know that some children have died. It was best practice due to death at the scene to get a warrant before a blood draw. There was an objection that got overruled. He explains the process to get a hold of the different people to get the search warrant signed. It was time consuming due to the day it happened, essentially, and the time. But this was all completed before they even entered the hospital. He explains the procedure to get people registered for the hospital in these types of cases. They were there for the blood draw and a wrist injury on the defendant. More talk of the process, and they actually showed the kit in court, or one of the kits, an example kit in court. Talk of having to move after they unpacked the kit due to the defendant's injury, so they had to repack the kit and move it to a new location. His body camera is muted at one point. He said it shouldn't have been. He did it. He later zips up his jacket covering the video. The video they have is cut into 4 parts. They show some of it. It's showing what was described, including the blood draw. There was someone making a lot of sounds during all of this, and it got brought up. It was a different patient. Some video was admitted but not shown at the time. The shown video was admitted after watching. Again, there's still that strange video thing where the defense is wanting the video to be played to the jury before they decide whether they want to challenge it, which is weird to me. If you haven't watched day one, I recommend it. It's just a weird thing that happened there, and it's explained more there. The defense wants to cross this witness, and oh boy, do they cross this witness. The defense asks the witness if he never shook the vials with the preservative at the bottom. And he says, yes, he didn't shake them. So the defense is making this motion where you take the vial and you shake it like this, right? Now that's very important. But the phlebotomist inverted the vials. There's an objection. It was withdrawn. Before the objection, what caused the objection was the defense asked the witness if the preservative wasn't mixed enough, could it cause fermentation in the vial? Now, I am going off of what I've seen in court. I'm sorry for the cop, but I'm going off of what I've seen in court. I assume, until this point, that she has a low blood alcohol, because they haven't given a number in court. I'm assuming it's a low number, and it had an interaction with her seizure meds. That's what my expectation is going to be for the case. But because the defense is now asking whether the blood could ferment, I'm wondering if there's a really high number coming up. That's my immediate thought here. There was an objection, and the question got withdrawn. So they didn't have to answer about the fermentation, because how would they know? The defendant was in the vehicle for 2 to 3 hours before going into the hospital. So remember that. Whatever the blood draw number is, we're talking hours later. The defense asked why he didn't get a blood draw right away. He says he was getting a search warrant. Defendant had treatment after the blood draw. Defense asked why they didn't do a breathalyzer. Witness says because he wanted to take the blood due to a serious injury. Defense asked if most of the tests he's done are breathalyzer, and he says no, most of his are blood. The defendant was cooperative when it came to tests, so why wasn't breathalyzer done first? Objection sustained. That was already explained. They needed to do blood because it's the practice that they do in a death, right? The blood was not refrigerated once put into the blood kit. His camera was muted at the scene, at the actual scene of the accident. There is no policy about muting cameras when talking between officers. You have to hold a button to mute it. The defense asked if it was, let me make sure I get this right. Oh, this witness worked at a police department previously, and the defense asked if he left or was terminated, and he says he left of his own accord. Defense asked about his legal opinion when it comes to the accuracy of the finger test. And there's an objection why are you asking a legal opinion? And also that's a test he didn't even perform. Defense withdraws it. Defense really is doing a number here. The defendant completed the alphabet test. The video was muted though, so you don't get to hear it. He asked her to count from 100 to 88. She did 100 to 91 at first. He knew the defendant was in a collision. He starts to ask if that would, the defense starts to ask if that would shake someone up. There's an objection. They reword it. The defendant didn't get the one leg test due to possible neuropathy. The officer had no proof of her having neuropathy. It was just being said. He hasn't seen her since or her walk today. He has no idea how she walks. Now, asking about the walking on the turning test, she didn't take it to her safety. She understood directions. He didn't know she was a former Commodore of the boat club. Honestly, not sure why that matters. The police vehicles do not have back-facing cameras, but she wasn't misbehaving. She wasn't peeing on herself or puking. She didn't lose control of bodily functions. It's common at high intoxication. He doesn't remember seeing the defendant with a cane. He doesn't remember if the airbags went off. This is, this is a guy at the scene dealing with her more than the vehicle. I think that makes sense. More talk if people are disoriented after a crash. Defense start asking if there were red Solo cups laying around, and there's an objection withdrawn. Okay, so at this point I'm like, she has to have been wasted, right? That's where my mind's at. If you are trying to preemptively make some sort of claim that a red Solo cup went flying into her vehicle to make her appear drunk, That's what that's the insinuation I'm getting. Not that that was said, but I'm like, I'm starting to think she was drunk. This witness never made it into the bar area. He doesn't even remember where the tables were at. It was so messy. He didn't ask the hospital staff to take additional blood from the defendant. He doesn't know if the blood kit was out of date since he doesn't check it. The hospital supplies it. And then the state's back up, asking questions, about the process to do with the vials. And they have the witness literally reading the instructions. And what does it say to do? It says to invert. Invert. It does not tell you to shake. So all of that stuff, the defense was going about, why didn't you shake it? It's not in the instructions. And even if it was, the witness wouldn't be the one to do it. It would be the phlebotomist who did invert it. And the witness is satisfied with how it was collected. Once they check into the hospital, the witness is at the mercy of the hospital. He has never asked the hospital to take extra blood, which was something that the defense asked about, and he doesn't know if they would ever do it. The camera was muted for private conversations. He was figuring out what he needed to do at the scene, his orders. It wasn't something the public needed to hear. Other than the injury, the defendant didn't seem shaken up by the crash. The defendant couldn't follow the finger instructions. The defense is back up again, talking to the witness. He said the witness previously said the client had a CAT scan, and the prosecution immediately goes, no, he didn't. That get withdrawn, and the judge literally laughs at the defense, which is not a good sign. The defendant had a head injury. She wasn't able to complete the finger test. That's it. There's a break, and they come back. A deputy is up. He was called to assist at the hospital, another set of eyes on the defendant and the evidence. He helped with the blood draw kit. He was pulled before the kit was done, though, due to other duties. There's no questions other than that. He was excused. Basically, he was the other set of eyes. Next up is yet another deputy. He was dispatched to the Swan Boat Club, and on the way, he was informed, while trying to get there, at least one child was dead. When he came, it was chaotic, and victims and life flight were trying to land. He was inside at one point. He spoke to the defendant. While speaking to the defendant, he smelled intoxicants, and the defendant's eyes were bloodshot. His body cam was active. They were putting forward the video with an edit to remove things that are inadmissible. So at this point, we get to see the defendant that day. The body cam. Her rights are read. She said she's hoping nobody is hurt. He does the whole, do you still want to talk to me thing? And she says yes. He asks her about her medications. She lists the one that we've heard mentioned before. And she talks about where she went to lunch. She had some chili and a sandwich. She had a glass of wine. And then she went home. She said she chilled out and waited for her husband to get up. He was taking a nap. She said she didn't drink more. And then laughed about not getting a drink here because she never made it that far. She said she takes her medication at 8 a.m. She said she was driving from where she had lunch to here and made no stops, which is not even matching up to the story she just told about being at home after the drink. So I don't know. It doesn't match. I replayed this multiple times, but it just doesn't match up with her story. It cuts. She said she pulled into the parking lot. She thought she was driving to the boat club, and evidently she was driving something I couldn't understand. To me, it sounded slurred. I tried multiple times. I couldn't understand it. Maybe that's my ears failing me. Because the witnesses say she wasn't slurring. She doesn't remember what happened when she got to the parking lot. She said she has these seizures. She said she's cleared to drive now. She has a card about it in her purse. Her last seizure was in March. Remember, this is April 20th. She was hospitalized for the seizure, had one at home and then another in the hospital. She has lapses of memory after seizures. On a scale of 0 to 10, from stone cold sober to passed out drunk, how is she? She says a 7. She doesn't think she is okay to drive. And as the door is closed, she's laughing. Defense is up for cross. The witness did not follow up on her medical records. No, of course, the detective interviewing her at the scene doesn't, follow all her medical records. He didn't know about her having a doctor's appointment in March. And the defense asked if he's aware that her last seizure, well, they call it an episode, was in October of 2023. There's an objection, it's overruled, and he says no, he was not aware. But like, she just said on video it was in March, and now they're saying October. He was aware she went through the building. He was aware it was a major crash. He wasn't sure how long after the crash he interviewed her, 20, 30 minutes. More talk of people after a crash not having all their faculties. Talk of the scale of 1 to 10. Defense says Defense asked, doesn't he think he should have waited to ask instead of right after? He said the defendant sounded sober. There was no slurring. Redirect by state. Defendant didn't seem shaken up. Slurring of speech isn't the only evidence of intoxication. The witness has encountered suspects who have not slurred their speech before, but have not been sober. Next up is the detective. She took photos of the scene itself, and the children who passed away. The photos of the kids are not being submitted to the jury. They aren't being published, but they're going to be available for the jury during deliberation, something like that. Basically, we're not going to have to see them, thankfully. The procedure is explained. Toxicology kits are not refrigerated, because remember, the defense asked about refrigerating the blood. They're not refrigerated. Defense is up. The witness doesn't know if at state level they refrigerate blood kits, and that was it. Next up is a lieutenant. He was off duty that day, but he got called in because he operates a drone. He was brought in to take photos of the club. Defendant was off scene. He explains how it works. The aerial photos are submitted, and they show some of the photos taken by drone. Another detective is up. He's called in to be an assistant, called in to be of assistance. He was a supervisor. At the time he arrived, defendant was off the scene. There's chaos, lots of work being done on the scene. He was the one who got the video surveillance camera. He did a search warrant of the defendant's home looking for surveillance footage. And this is very important. They found cameras attached to a DVR. The video was time-stamped, and they checked to see if the timestamp was accurate. It was not. It's an hour slow. The DVR was seized, the video was extracted, and they moved to admit one of the videos. Defense wants to approach. Don't know why. The video is now being played. It shows the defendant leaving. She holds onto the railing on her steps, kind of waddles down the sidewalk with her feet sticking out. Next video is from the other side of the road. This time you can see her enter the vehicle. You can see her while she's backing up and speeding in reverse. She is off camera and now speeding forward, zooming off in a direction. This video is how they learned she crashed into the truck in the tree off screen. More drone footage, you can see the truck she crashed into and how far it went into the fence. He interviewed the defendant as well. That's what I put here. They are submitting multiple hours of interrogation that was provided to the defense months ago. The defense says they haven't seen this version, though, because they removed things that weren't relevant, I guess. So now they're holding the witness for recall so the defense can review the interrogation. The defense is up for the cross, though, in the meantime. Defense starts to ask who's aware of the defense attorney filing his appearance with the prosecutor's office the morning of the search warrant. Objection sustained. There's a whole thing where they're trying to go this angle that the search warrant was illegal because the defense wasn't made aware of it. That's kind of what they're going with. And the judge was really unhappy because this is something that should have been handled months ago. And he's supposed to submit if there's stuff about it. Again, day one was a thing. You should check it out if you haven't yet. Make sure I'm getting back to everything here because there's some weird stuff with this video. The defense asked the prosecution to pull up the video of the incident of her leaving the house. The defense asked if the original video had a tree in the frame. The detective says that's what the original showed. No tree visible. He's making the detective explain how he extracted it. The detective did it himself. And redirect the state gets them to say the video is the same as when he saw it with no alterations. Basically, it sounds like the defense was trying to get them to claim that this was like a cut version of the video and like there was more to it and he actually cut off part of it. I don't know what was up with that, but it was there. A deputy is up now. He was dealing with another crash and then responded to the scene. He took photos, assisted deputies. He was present when the vehicle was removed. He followed it to the tow yard. He took photos of the towing location. Shows the vehicle from the front with pictures. You can see the damage. He watched an employee remove the event data recorder. That's going to be important from the vehicle. It was taken to the station. An image was taken. He is not qualified to discuss the contents of the report, only how to obtain it. The defense verifies he did no interpretation of the data, and they have nothing more. There's a break. I think it was lunch, and we're back. Now up is the lieutenant. The CV of the lieutenant submitted basically his qualifications and experience. He explains what the event data recorder in vehicles does. The lieutenant is an analyst, so he can read it. He looked for if braking happens. It uses formulas to get you close to the speed. Explains how it knows what happened during a crash. His opinion is that the data he saw in this crash is from this particular crash. He explains the type of things that wake up the EDR. If it was a significant enough event like airbags, it gets locked and won't be overwritten. It records a lot of information like seatbelts in use or headlights. The report shows 2 events. It records gear, acceleration, braking. The first event shows reverse at 13.8 miles per hour. The accelerator was down 100%. It shows the vehicle going in a backwards U-shaped acceleration with no airbag deployment, and it appears to refer to the first crash. The second event reflects the vehicle striking the building. Brakes were not engaged. Accelerator was at 98.6% pedal to the floor. 5 seconds before the crash, 29.5 miles per hour. 4 seconds before the crash, 30.3 miles per hour. 3 seconds to the crash, 30.7 miles per hour. 2 seconds before the crash, 32.9 miles per hour. 1 second prior to the crash, 37.8 miles per hour. And at the time of impact, 44.3 miles per hour. Cross begins. He's relying on a device that's on the vehicle. He can only say what the vehicle's device says. Defense asks if you would need to be pedal to the metal for this type of acceleration. The witness says at least 50%. State back up and asks what the data shows. And it shows the percentage on the pedal is rising from nothing to rising to nothing, the 80s to nothing and back down. Basically, it's like someone's putting their foot on the pedal, off, back on, off. It's not consistent. Defense asks more. A witness says nothing on the gas, and then there's gas. Nothing, and then there's gas. The defense asks if it's like a seizure. Objection withdrawn. Okay, next up is a Swan Boat Club member there for the child's birthday party, a friend of the mother. It was a beautiful party, and it was a great day for the kids. She's crying. A car came through the wall. She was sitting with her back to the wall when the car came through. She had tables thrown on top of her. She had a concussion. Her pelvis was broken in 6 places. She had to have surgery for internal bleeding. She had to have surgeries to her nose, massive hematoma. Her tibia was fractured. She had a head injury. She had to go to speech therapy and loses concentration sometimes. She was in the hospital for 17 days. She has nerve damage. All steps hurt. Couldn't walk for 3 months. She has to shift when sitting. She had none of these injuries before the crash. She had to take 4 months off work. She had to stop therapy due to the nerve pain. No cross. Next up is a family member who's at the boat club for her little cousin's birthday. It was a beautiful party with circus decorations everywhere. She remembers debris. It sounded like an explosion. When she woke up, she couldn't move. She lost consciousness. She could only move her leg and neck. She saw the car in the building. She had 3 broken ribs, a punctured lung, a broken sternum, a hematoma on the head, a concussion, and PTSD. She was in the hospital for 3 days. Physically, she still has random aches, and she gets worried about doing certain movements in the gym in case there's something wrong with her body. She's afraid of getting in cars, especially if someone else is driving. She has outbursts. She has panic attacks in cars, lasting mental injuries. She used to work at a Ford dealership. She was off work for a few months, tried to do part-time, but got overwhelmed working around cars. She was 18 at the time of the accident. And now, the mother of the children who died. And I had such a bad feeling with this defense attorney. I really did. She says she's the mother of Zane, Alana, and Jaden Phillips. It was the birthday boy. She's the birthday boy's godmother. She said her mother, 3 children, and her nephew were there. They explored all the things set up. The kids roamed and had fun. It was time for lunch after the kid's birthday. A song was sung. The last thing she remembers is her kids eating, and they wanted to go out and play. She got them a cake pop before they ran out, and nothing. The next thing she remembers is waking up in the hospital. She does remember opening her eyes, and it was black and like long distance voices, but then the hospital. As you can imagine, she's crying. She woke up choking on the tube down her throat. When she was asleep, she went to sleep and woke up again. She heard her sister crying. There was an accident. Then it hit her. Where are her kids? She remembers being in a building. How was there an accident? She's told Jaden was life-flighted and Zane and Alana were no longer there. She started freaking up, but she's hooked up to a bunch of machines and she doesn't feel pain due to the medication. She tried to scream, and then it went black again. Sounds like they medicated her. At this point, they had to go up and give her more tissues on the stand. She has a punctured lung, broken ribs, broken shoulder blade, hematoma. Her chin was busted open, her lip busted open, mouth injuries, loss of tooth, and nerve damage in her face. She woke up the day after the accident and was released 4 days after the accident. She had to use a walker at home. She couldn't get into a vehicle for a month. She was in pain, couldn't sit down or lay down. She had physical therapy, took several months. Jaden was in the hospital for 2 weeks. She couldn't care for him when he got home. He had physical therapy and a nurse. He had multiple broken bones, fingers, wrist, pelvis, legs, gash on the back of his head, punctured lungs, broken ribs, and a concussion. He had to have surgery on his legs. Jaden won't be testifying. He can walk around today, but it took many months to get to that point. And they show pictures of Zane and Alana. And here comes the part I was dreading. The defense's cross-examination of the mother. The defense attorney begins by crying at the stand, sobbing in front of the mother, saying he is sorry for her loss. He lost his own son in September. His son died peacefully. He might be a defense attorney, but he's human. His prayers are with her. He says he just wanted to say he feels bad for her family. This isn't a club you want to belong to. He doesn't have any questions, and the prosecutor asks the judge to intervene, and the judge is about to say something, and it ends. This guy, in the trial, the death of 2 children, went in front of the mother and made it about himself. I feel like there should be some punishment. That can't be okay, right? I'm not alone in this, right? That can't be okay. I don't think it helped with the jury. I'll tell you that. They swear to the next witness. There's a brief approach. We don't know what for. The defendant at this time has tears, real or not, sobbing a little bit. Now there's a detective who was brought in, who was called in. He was off duty, but he got called in to lead the investigation. Lots of medical personnel and law enforcement on the scene. At this time, the defendant was gone. 12 total victims, 5 with serious injuries. The inside looked like the destruction of a child's birthday party. There was no sign of beer or kegs. Nothing showing alcohol use. I'm assuming this is because the defense keeps trying to... It sounds like I think the prosecution knows that it sounds like the defense is trying to claim like magically alcohol made it into that vehicle. He did the medical examiner investigations of Zane and Alana. He was there when Zane was in back of the ambulance, but he was originally found under the wheel of the vehicle. Alana was wedged between the doorway and the front of the vehicle. That's explained more on day 1. Alana Phillips' cause of death was multiple blunt force injuries, instantaneous death, and the cause was accident. Zane Phillips' cause of death was multiple blunt force trauma, seconds-minutes for length, and cause of death accident. They admit the medical records of the victims, all of the victims, and the defense is up for cross. They says that this witness investigated multiple aspects of the case. They executed a search warrant at the restaurant or bar. I'm not sure which one it is. Maybe it's both. Defense said bar, where the defendant had been, where the defendant told the investigator she had been there for lunch. Another investigator was told that. It was held off as a crime scene. The receipt was shown that she purchased some food and a glass of wine. He didn't talk to the server. During the search warrant, no evidence she drank anything else on the scene was shown. He knew she had one glass of wine, according to what she told an officer, and that lines up with the receipt from the search warrant. No redirect, and that is where day 2 ends. Now, we haven't still gotten to the point of the actual results from that blood alcohol test. And I really, at day 1, I was thinking that this is probably going to be like a low number. Because they even even if it's below 0.08, you could be impaired. But it really feels like the defense is trying to brace for the fact it's going to be really high. So high, they're going to argue that it must have been skewed somehow. That's what it feels like. I don't know. I'm just going off of what's in the case. The only thing I've looked up is in day 1, I looked up side effects of the medication they said she's on, and it said if you drink with it, it can make you sleepy and tired. I think it was absolutely disgusting what the defense did with the mother. Literally, instead of doing that, just don't cross-examine her. Making it about him, trying to get sympathy in that way with the jury, like his son dying peacefully is comparable to this tragedy. And by the way, if you didn't watch day 1, he has a connection to one of the witnesses, so it's for the prosecution. It's a mess. It's a mess. Maybe he shouldn't have taken the case. With that being said, this is current now. This is at the time of me filming. This is current. This is 5:36 a.m. on March 5th that I'm filming this. Okay, so I'm going to try to be up for when these premiere. I might not be, and if I'm not, I apologize. Hopefully this gets you up to speed on the case. I mentioned this in day 1 if you didn't watch it. I am planning to cover this case as much as I should be able to all the days. I do have a game that I'm planning to cover on my other channel, possibly on the 6th from my childhood that's getting a remaster, and I don't think I can stay away. But I do want to also still cover this, hopefully the same day. So there might be a slight delay for day 3, but I do plan to cover every day of this case. So it's not a fun case to watch. They do show the body cam footage. So if you don't want to watch that, but you want to know the play-by-play idea of what's happening, hopefully these videos are here, and I'll see you in the next one.